global warming. It's not going anywhere. The left has found their way into every aspect of your life, and they are never going to let go of it. Nothing will stop them, no matter how much they're proven wrong, no matter how many of their predictions come and go. Like this one from Greta back June 2018. She said a top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuel over the next 5 years. That was 5 years ago, and humanity still exists. And I believe, well, that tweet doesn't exist anymore. I think she deleted it on that day, to the day 5 years ago. It's funny. It's like she was still holding out hope. Like 3 days before the 5-year anniversary, she's like, oh, maybe humanity will still be eliminated in the final moments and my prediction will still be true. It was not. By the way, here's Greta supporting Hamas. I think the only weirder thing than this is queers for Palestine. But this one's right up there, combining the plight of the Palestinians with climate justice. But that's exactly the point we need to know. This is what we need to know. People with this worldview, it is the Marxist worldview. It's about the oppressed and the oppressors. Very simply put, I know we've talked about this many times before, but this is very important. The Marxist worldview, it's very simple. Oppressors, it's like white, straight men, right? Israel. Oppressors can do nothing good. And the oppressed can do no wrong, ever. Now, the left keeps pushing the limits as to what can do no wrong means. So right now, we have a new line, which is, can we kill 1,200 Jews, women and children? And can that still be considered do no wrong? And indeed, yes, it can. That is not wrong, apparently, to do. So they keep pushing the limit. But it's that same Marxist worldview framework, which is why the far left supports the planet over human beings. Human beings are the oppressors, and the planet is the oppressed. Human beings are parasites who are killing the planet. Humans are oppressors, the planet is the oppressed. And there's only two ways to solve this problem. The first way, admittedly a little extreme, is to indeed, as Greta was sort of bemoaning, but not really, is to end humanity. The other way, so that's the first way to solve the problem of the oppressors oppressing Mother Nature. The other way to solve the problem is a one world government, which is why, of course, these people love the UN, because from the UN, they can control your life in really profound ways, and they will. From the food you eat. I remember when I first heard about this, and we all laughed about the left's goal to stop you from eating meat. And then it was a couple years after that, AOC talked about it, and I think people are still laughing at her, but they're serious, and they'll do it. I mean, New York City right now, the New York City public schools, they have meatless Monday and vegan Friday. So we already got some social engineering at a very young age, but they'll force it on you. Don't worry. They're just talking about it at the latest UN climate conference. We'll talk with Mark Moreno coming up in a little bit. He was at this event. And of course, they talk about this all the time. Bill Gates has been on this for a long time. It was 2013 when he first jumped into the lab-grown meat game, where he he said that natural meat, that's what he calls it, natural meat is very inefficient. He wrote a book a couple years ago, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. And he said all rich countries should move to 100% synthetic beef. 100%. And he assured us that we'll get used to the taste difference. Don't worry, you'll get used to it, and that the meat it'll start to taste better over time. You just got to give it some time, you'll get used to it. And Gates was one of the first investors in Beyond Meat and Impossible Meat or Impossible Food or whatever, the two biggest fake meat companies in the world right now. One of my favorite pictures of all time is from COVID. Do you remember the run on the grocery stores and everyone thought they were going to die and maybe there wouldn't be enough food to feed my family? I don't know if we can survive. And shelves across the country totally wiped out with everything except for the section of fake meat. No, it wasn't bad. Sure, my whole family may die if we don't have enough food, but I'm definitely not eating that. Like there's no that's great. But they won't, it's still there. Like all that fake stuff's still in your grocery store today. They're not going to stop pushing it on you. And if you don't willingly accept it eventually, they'll force it on you. Don't even get me started on how they're going to make you eat bugs. I think we did a whole hour on that one time. So you just can't laugh these people away. Oh, you can mock them. Please do. But you can't laugh them away. And don't think that you can dismiss these nutcases either. They're not going away. They're on a crusade to save the planet. They'll never stop. They'll never stop until there's no more ribeyes and you're happy with your crickets and maggots. They also want to make everything more expensive. Why? Because they have this environmental worldview called small is beautiful, less is more. And one way to force you to buy less and use less is to make everything way more expensive. And the way to make everything more expensive is to make electricity more expensive. Here's John Kerry.
We ought to be transitioning out of coal. There shouldn't be any more coal-fired power plants permitted anywhere in the world. That's how you can do something for health. And the reality is that we're not doing it. So, the measure here is really sounding the alarm bell. I find myself getting more and more militant because I do not understand how adults who are in position of responsibility can be avoiding responsibility for taking away those things that are killing people on a daily basis. And the reality is that the climate crisis and the health crisis are one and the same.
China builds 2 coal power plants a week. Pretty good. 36% of all global electricity is powered by coal. 20% of U.S. energy is coal. And listen, if you want to get rid of coal power plants, okay, but there's no plan to replace it with anything. No plan to replace it with nuclear or anything like that. It's just wind and solar. Right? So it makes everything more expensive. Also, there's nothing, and they want that. They want everything to be more expensive, so you use less, buy less, require less, and then help the planet. Stop being so oppressive, oppressor. And there's nothing the left can't blame on climate change. This is another benefit of climate change and why it's going nowhere. This is Al Gore talking about mental health in America.
There's a mental health crisis around the world, Jake, that we hear people talking about. I think that one of the main reasons for that is that young people look at the fact that we are not yet solving the climate crisis or dealing with some of these other challenges. And we hear this word thrown around, polycrisis. Well, solving the climate crisis is a poly solution. We know what to do. We have the means to do it. And we have to make sure that we make the right political choices in our democracy to enable ourselves to make the right choices.
I've never heard the word polycrisis before. Have you ever heard that word? I've never heard it. But the goal here, it seems, is to make it seem incredibly complicated. And because the problem, it's a polycrisis. And the problems are so convoluted and so complicated and so multifaceted that there's no way we can do this on our own. We got to get everyone at the table. We need one government who can just really solve it once and for all. And we need everyone to be forced to play their role. By the way, this is Al Gore's house. This is his 10,000 square foot house in Nashville. And then he's got another one. He's got a beach house in California. Bought it 13 years ago for, it's right on the water. Bought it 13 years ago for $9 million. So I can't even fathom what that thing is worth right now. Weird place to put a house if you think the sea levels are rising, but whatever. The media lying to you constantly, as always. They'll never really fess up. This is one of the Project Veritas videos, one of the CNN technical directors admitting that they will always fall back on climate change.
Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was, right? So our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness.
What does that look like?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I have a feeling it's just going to be constantly showing videos of decline in ice and weather warming up and the effects it's having on the economy and really talking
Who decides that?
Head of the network,
Who's that? Is that Zucker?
Zucker, yeah. I imagine that he's got his council and they've all discussed where they think
so that's the next
pandemic like story like that will beat to death. But that one's got longevity. You know what I mean? It's not like there's a definitive ending to the pandemic, or like it'll taper off to a point that it's not a problem anymore. I think it's going to take years, so they'll probably be able to milk that for quite a bit.
Yeah, they sure will. Here's the bottom line. I was talking to someone who worked in Trump's State Department, and she said the entire driving focus when she was at the State Department, wherever they went around the world and whatever problem they were confronted with, was America first. Things can be complicated, but if you have a single framework of America first and you funnel everything through that worldview, it can make things easier to handle and make sense of. So their mantra was America first. And she said the left's guiding principle and this administration's guiding principle is climate change. So all roads fall back to climate change. Every decision they make is, well, how does this affect climate change? How do we solve climate change? What can we do for climate change? And so you got to give me an example of that. She said, okay, well, the Biden administration, they go to China and they have to decide, are we going to speak out against their ongoing genocide against the Uyghurs? Or do we leave that alone so that we can try to get more concessions out of China with climate change? And maybe they can only build one power plant instead of 2 every single week. And they choose that one because that's more important to them. So it's a real trade-off of Biden's team, and they do this all the time. And they make that trade-off because, as Joe Biden said, anyone who willfully denies the impact of climate change is condemning the American people to a very dangerous future. He's no different than any of the rest of them.